Hi guys, this is Umair. Today I'm going to be talking about callback versus promises. Most people ask about what is the difference between these two concepts. In JavaScript or a nodejs, that is the framework of JavaScript, you might be confused with callback and promises and in what scenarios we should use a callback versus a promises. So I'll be giving you examples that what is the difference between these two, in which situation we need to decide whether we want to use a callback or we want to use a promise. So let's get started and write the code. Before writing the code, I want to let all of you know that if you want to buy a book related to JavaScript, and that is a really good book, I'm going to give the link of this book in the description below. If you want to learn the more advanced JavaScript with the examples, then this is a really good book, and that include a really good examples for you to learn. Even if you already know JavaScript, that will really help you in learning more advanced concepts of JavaScript. So first of all, I will talk about callback in JavaScript. So for callback, we need to define functions, and each function will execute asynchronously, and the second function will be dependent on the first function, and the third function will be dependent on the second function, and so on. Let me write an example, then I'll explain you what it all about. So first of all, we need to define a function. So I'm going to define three functions that can be any number of functions, like function first, and that takes a value and takes a callback. So I'm gonna copy this function and I'm gonna paste it 2 more times, and I'm going to change the name of these functions to second and third. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to call the first function, and unless it doesn't return me any specific result or a response, I don't want my second function to be called, and similar for the third function. So I will use a callback for making it dependent on each other. So first of all, I will call first function and I will send it a value. So let's say I'm sending it a value 2, and after that I need to send it a function as a parameter. So function first result, and if there is an error, so what it means that I'm sending out 2 will be received in this value, and this whole function will be sent to this callback parameter. All right, and using this callback parameter, that can be anything. I've just written it callback, that is more meaningful. Using this callback parameter, I can return the value that can be received within this first result, and then I can send out a boolean whether it's a error or not. So let me return like callback, and the first value is value plus 2, and after that I need to send out if there is an error or not. So there is no error. Okay, so in here I am checking if there is an error. If there is no error, then call the second function. So I'm copying this first function, and after that I'm calling my second function, and I am receiving the second result, and in the second function I'm sending out the first result. Okay, so just copy it and paste it, call the third function, and I will receive a third result from here, and inside it I will check the result. So third result. Okay, so I'm gonna copy these callback statements. Okay, so that's it. Now what it is doing, first of all I'm sending out 2 is being received within this value, and inside this first function I'm using this callback. This is being referred to a function. Okay, and using this function callback, I am adding 2 within the value and returning this value and this boolean value in that callback function. Okay, and then inside this function I'm checking out if there is an error. If there is no error, then I'm calling out the second function. Okay, and inside the second function I am sending out the result of the first callback function. Okay, and that will be received here, and again I am adding up 2 and calling back, and that callback will send out these 2 values in the callback function of this second function, and that will be received in the second result and error. And I'm checking out if there is no error, then I'm calling out the third function, and that can reach up to unlimited number of functions. Okay, so the purpose of doing it in this way is that if I'm just adding up these 2 values, and that takes no time. Okay, but what if we are calling server calls, we are calling an API, and we are fetching out a very big data that is actually take some time. So, and that data is need for this second function. Okay, so I have called the second function within the first function. It means that unless and until the first function doesn't return a specific value right here, don't call this second function. And if the second function, this callback of the second function doesn't return the result right here, then until and unless don't call the third function, and same goes further. Okay, and same for the third function or fourth function or fifth function, or we can call hundreds of functions like this. Okay, so let's try it. Let's dry run it. First of all, I'm sending out 2, that will be 4 will be received right here, and 4 is sent out right here. 4 plus 2 6, and 6 will be received here, and 6 is going to send out here, and that will be add up here, and that will be become 8, and then 8 should be printed right here. So let's check out the result whether it's working or not. So I'm going to click on run and run script.js. I'm using WebStorm. You might be using other IDE that can have other way to run the scripts, but I have this way in WebStorm. So let's click on run script and go to terminal, and you can see it has shown me the result 8, and that is correct. Okay, so let me first try and give you an overview that how it is working. So first result, and I'm copying this line, and here I'm sending out the second result. Okay, so now let's run it again. So now you can see it has printed 4 6 8, and you can see that first is printed the 4, and it didn't print the result of the second function before the result of the first function, because the second function calling is dependent on the result of the first function. So that is if we want to fetch the data from a server, like we want to fetch all the tweets from a Twitter, and that tweets needs to be saved in database. So we can't save an empty data to the database. First we need to verify whether all the data have been fetched from the Twitter, and if all the data have been fetched from the Twitter, then we will save that data to the database. So that is really helpful to use the callback function. So now let's talk about promises. Let me give you an example, then I will compare callback and promises and give you an idea what to use when and what is good for you people to use in various scenarios. Okay, so I'm going to comment this much code. Okay, and below that I'm going to use these same functions with the help of promises. In fact, I won't be commenting these functions. I'll be just commenting this first, this usage of these 3 functions. Okay, so right here there are many ways to use the promises in JavaScript and Node.js. There are various modules available, extensions available that provide promises, but right now in JavaScript I will just give you an overview using a promise constructor function that is pretty basic and the general usage of promises, and that is very easy to understand, and I just want to give you guys an idea that what is promises and how to use it. Okay, so now first of all I need to create a variable of a promise using a constructor promise function. So I will use promise equals to new promise, and it needs a function and that returns a resolve and reject. And for returning the data from within the promise, we need to use this resolve parameter, and that is actually the function calling. So inside it, let's return 2. Okay, so by using this promise, we can execute a function or a multiple functions. So let's execute only one function first and see whether it's working or not. So using this promise dot then and function and response, and inside it let's print the response. Right now I'm not calling the first, second and third function, so these are just a return here. These are not being used right now. So let's save this file and I'm going to click on run and run scripts, and you can see it has printed 2. Okay, so what it is doing is using this promise variable, it is using this then function. Make sure and remember that if you are using a constructor promise function, and in most of the cases most people use the same technique of using promises, they use then. It means that don't execute this function that is within the then function unless and until this promise return the result. Okay, and when this promise will return the result, when this resolve will be called, and we can call a server call inside it, we can call a database call, we can call any kind of API. Right now it won't take any time, but if you are calling a server call, that might take time, so we need to add promises inside it, or even we can use callbacks inside the promises as well. Okay, so now let's create and use these more functions inside these promises. So first of all, let me remove this console.log response, and I'm going to use this function. Okay, so I'm going to remove this function, and before using these functions let me remove the callback because we are using promises, so we don't need callback right here. And instead of these callbacks we need to return these values. Okay, so let's copy this line and copy here and copy here. Okay, so now let's use this promise dot then, and we need to call the functions. So then first dot then, second dot then, third dot then, and function and response and console.log and response. Okay, so let's run it, and you can see it has printed 8. So let me explain you how is it working. So promise.then, and I'm using this function and it is calling this function. I'm not sending out any value inside it. Instead it will automatically receive the value from the previous function. Right here the previous result of this promise is this promise, this function, and whatever will be returned from this resolve is becoming the parameter that is going to be sent from within this then and this first function. Okay, so this is being sent out 2 right here, and then 2 plus 2 equals to 4, and then 4 is being used in the second function, and then 4 is being received here. 4 plus 2 equals to 6, and it is calling third, and third is receiving 6, and then 6 plus 2 equals to 8, and then 8 is being received within this response, and that response is being logged out, and that's why you have seen the result 8. Okay, so let's compare the callbacks and the functions. We are executing the same kind of functionality using the callbacks and the functions. We can also use before returning right here, we can also use callback function. We can use the promises within the callbacks or the callback within the promises. So it's up to us that how we want to use it. Okay, we need to use a callback right here. If within this first function we need to fetch the data from somewhere, that will take time. So we don't want to return the value from here until it receives the data from that server. Okay, so we need to wait for the server to send the data, and when we will receive, we can return the data within that callback function. Okay, so right here, let me bring it up a bit. So in callback we use this bunch of code right here, but in promises we just wrote this function. So you can see that in promises we have the minimal lines of code, and that is more cleaner, and in callbacks that becomes more messy, and that is very difficult to understand. If we want to see and revise our code after a few months, then we won't be able to remember it, that what I did. And right now these are just 3 callbacks, but in real-time applications we might have 20 plus or the 50 plus callback functions within the other functions, so that will become really messy, and that messiness is generally known as callback hell. So callback hell lead us to the promises, and that forced us to use the promises because promises are more cleaner and more easy to remember, more easy to revise in the future. Okay, so that's why if we want to use promises, or if we want to call so many functions that are dependent on the other function results, then it is recommended that we can use promises, and we need to use promises. We can also use callbacks, but that will not be a good practice for other people who are your team members who want to see the code. That will be difficult for them to get the idea what is happening here. So that is the actually reason. Both are the things are same, both perform the same functionality. There is nothing that a callback can do that a promise can't do, and same as the promise, there is nothing that promise can do that a callback can't do. So it's up to you, it's up to us that how we want to use both the things. We can merge both the things, so but we want to follow the best practices and make our code more cleaner and more good looking. So that's it for this video. I hope that you have liked it. If you have any question, just comment below, and I just want to remember you that in the next video I'll be talking about asynchronous programming in Node.js. And that will be very helpful for you guys who wants to write asynchronous. Nowadays many things is asynchronous, so we need to learn that what are the best practices of writing asynchronous code using Node. So wait for it. Make sure to subscribe my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. That is really helpful for us, that really support us, that encourage us to create more and more new videos. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned.